Franziska Giffey, she has held many offices both on the federal level and the city level here in Berlin. Currently, she's the Berlin State Senator for Economic Affairs, Energy and Public Enterprises. Franziska Giffey, before we dive into the question of business, when we look at autocracies advancing around the globe, what role can cities, what role can states play in countering extremist and autocratic tendencies?
So first of all, I want to welcome everybody here in Berlin. As Vice Mayor and Senator for Economic Affairs, we are really proud to say that this conference takes place in our city. So I heard already how emotional this day already was, and we are so convinced that this conference belongs to Berlin and that we can show what cities can achieve in the battle for freedom, for democracy, and for human rights. And I think when the cities work together, because they are on the local spot, they see what they can do in a very practical way. And if you want to have peace, you have to start on the local level. And if you want to have democracy, it has to be from the ground and from the people who are in their local communities. And for that reason, it is so important that cities work together all over the world and that cities support other cities and countries who don't have democracy yet. And for us, it is, as a city from where people live from more than 170 different nations in Berlin, it's of course so important to see where these people come from, what are the reasons why they moved to Berlin, why they are refugees. And this is important to see and also to think how we can support all the ones who are not able to live in a free society and in a democratic society. So Berlin has a responsibility, and our main field, our label and what we are all about is freedom and of course diversity. And for that reason, we are really proud that all of you are here. Thank you so much for being here.
So a couple of years ago, Berlin and Kiev joined the Pact of the Free Cities. Can you be a little bit more concrete? What can cities do to support each other when you look at the Pact of the Free Cities or the partnership between Berlin and Kiev?
I mean, for Berlin and Ukraine, it's a very special relationship, I would say. When the aggression started in a very deep way in February in 2022, I was governing mayor of that city, and I can say what was the first thing for us was help all the refugees. We had days when we had 10,000 people per day coming from Ukraine, arriving at the Berlin main station. And we had a lot of people from civil society, from our enterprises, but also from the city government and the district governments who helped in a very, very easy way and very flexible way to give all these people who came here, many children, many women, a very fast support. And we have now a Ukrainian community of about 100,000 people. And apart from that first help in the refugee situation, we had the question what we can do to support Kiev as our sister city. And we came into the Pact of the Free Cities, and we came into the sister cityship with Kiev. And we want to help also preparing for rebuilding and cooperation in the ecosystems. Both of us have a very strong startup ecosystem, and we can work together even now, but even also for preparing for hopefully the soon to be time when the peace is coming back, and Ukraine will need a lot of help to rebuild. And for that reason, this week on Wednesday, we will have a Kiev Investment Forum for the first time in Berlin. So we have a lot of partners who are willing to prepare the rebuilding and the concrete help in this critical situation now, but also when the time of peace is hopefully soon coming.
Let me bring in Kathrin Anselm at this point. Kathrin Anselm is the managing director at Airbnb, and she's responsible for 25 countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And Franziska Giffey mentioned the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, and that was a time when Airbnb decided to step up and support refugees coming out of Ukraine. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, that's right. So, maybe taking a step back, for those of you who don't know Airbnb, Airbnb is a platform where home sharers can rent out their space and host the world. This tourism is innately human and connects cultures. Airbnb has an NGO that sits next to the company, and this NGO, Airbnb.org, provides temporary housing to people in need around the world. To this day, we've been doing this for 15 years. We've supported 50 crises and helped more than 250,000 people to find temporary accommodation with hosts on Airbnb. The biggest project in these past 15 years was definitely Ukraine. 3 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, Brian Chesky, who's the founder of Airbnb, texted me and said, I want to activate Airbnb.org, helping Ukrainians fleeing Ukraine, finding temporary housing. And I want to commit publicly that we can help 100,000 people. That was the biggest endeavor we've ever done so far, and I'm extremely proud to say that after 6 months, we've provided housing to 137,000 people in more than 90 countries. Many of them found temporary housing in Germany and Poland, but even in the US and Canada. And I remember the time, I live in Europa City in Berlin. I rent an apartment there, and I remember vividly flocks of Ukrainians showing up at the central station. And I'm really happy to work for a company that not only is sort of democratic in its business model because it allows an individual to participate in tourism, but it uses its assets to shape civil society and support good democratic values, freedom, and helping people in need. And we often say that was one of the best projects, many of us had in their career so far.
Mm-hmm. So today we're talking all about defending freedom, defending democracy. In many countries we're seeing democracy and freedom in decline. We're also seeing companies bowing to autocratic tendencies, onto autocratic leaders. How can businesses stand up in the face of democratic backsliding?
By, first of all, showing public commitment and saying, my job is not only to run a capitalistic company, I am part of a community. And in Airbnb's case, it's very obvious. We're deeply ingrained in local communities around the world. So we have a duty to give back. And then you sit down and you look at your values and you look at your company assets and you think about what you can do. And in our case, I can only give the example of Airbnb, but maybe this is inspiring for others to just look at their company in the same way. So we said we have more than 5 million hosts around the world. We have 8 million listings. We have the technology. Why not open it up to host people in need for free? And in the Ukraine case, and it's true for all projects, this is free of charge for the ones claiming the temporary housing. It's funded by Airbnb and donors and the employees and the founders, but also the generosity of the hosts. But in Airbnb's case, this goes broader. And for an American company, without going into details, it isn't easy. But I'm very proud to say that we commit to democratic values and to inclusion. This is our business model. People open up their home. So this is what you need to believe ultimately when you run this kind of business. And that's why, for example, we've been supporting Hate Aid, a German NGO that fights against digital hate on the internet, digital hate, for the second year in a row with each time 100,000 euros in support. And this is why we also show up here. I couldn't be prouder to be a partner of the Berlin Freedom Week with my team, because this is where we need this space to exchange ideas and to inspire each other to do every day a little bit better.
Mariana Oleskiv, you're originally from Ukraine. You live in Brussels now. You're the Director of Tourism at Capital European Affairs. You've worked in tourism for more than 20 years. How did that change when the war broke out? And what is it like to work in tourism when your country is at war?
Thank you, first of all, for being here. Thank you, Berlin, for bringing all these great people to the stage. And I think it's a really inspiring event. And it gives hope that we, as democracy, will win that fight with autocracy that so far probably is succeeding. But going back to, in general, in Ukraine, and I wanted to start with, I think that the movie 20 Days in Mariupol, one of the strongest, I hope you have seen it. If not, then it's really something you need to put on your list. One of the strongest messages there is that the war reveals who we truly are. It exposes in some people evil and in some people good. And I think that in general we passed that test as society because the war. Russia didn't achieve their goals. They didn't take Kyiv in 3 days. They didn't take Ukraine in 3 years, in 4 years, and I'm sure they will not do it. But for that, it's really important to have that unity. And that people, in that very moment, when you don't have time for strategies, for long-term decisions, you just make those really fast moves. And like Airbnb did when supporting Ukrainians who were fleeing war, how hosts and people, the community of Airbnb did supporting people who were renting their places in Kyiv. They could not really have guests, but people were renting out apartments. So that was not the company's idea. That was just people who decided, okay, we'll support each other this way. Berlin hosted people and helped all the time their sister city. So that unity in hospitality industry was very strong in Ukraine. So basically, everybody from the first hours were doing what they can do the best. So hosting people, feeding people, helping them to move by transport companies organizing all those routes because there was a huge flows of people trying to escape the war. And now the industry is also playing an important role. And I would really mention sanctions. And I think it's very important to not start doing business as usual because, as Kathrin said, yes, you can find the ways to avoid sanctions. You can start working with Russia somehow with affiliated companies, I don't know, others, but it's important to be committed to that we cannot support regimes that will later become threat to all of us. And sanctions is an important part of it.
And I want to mention here that you were instrumental in getting Russia expelled from the UN World Tourism Organization in 2022. How political is tourism, in your opinion?
Oh, it was a very strong message. It was the only actually UN agency UN institution that kicked out Russia. And I think that those countries have no right to sit on one table with the others, because tourism is an industry of peace. It's a freedom of movement. And unfortunately, the wars and undemocratic regimes do not help it to be that way. So now we cannot have international tourists in Ukraine as we used to have. And that was my job, because I was a chair of Ukrainian tourism board. And my job was to promote Ukraine as tourism destination. And then when the war started, we had to do completely different things to keep Ukraine still present in main international exhibitions. And again, Berlin here is a very important platform for us, ITB Berlin, that with support of City of Berlin, with support also of Airbnb, Ukraine is always present there saying, we're still here, we're fighting, our industry works for domestic tourism, but it works. And the wars like that, they do not help tourism to develop. So how can you sit on that table? It's not easy, and it's not easy for all people here, being and fighting for their countries, for their freedom, for their democracies in exile. It's even more difficult than for us, because we still have our country. But it's important, this fight is crucial. I think this fight is very crucial for everyone, not to show Russia that they can win that war. And yeah.
Franziska Giffey, can tourism play a positive role of reinforcing a spirit of democracy and freedom when people come to Berlin, for example, and experience not only the history but lived freedom? Can that reinforce the global efforts?
Definitely, yes. I mean, we had, as you said, I think Ukraine is very, very present in Berlin, but also in very many important international venues. If you take the ITB or you take the World Exposition in Osaka, I was where I have visited the stand of Ukraine. It was so incredible what you showed, how you brought together this exposition with the difficult questions of how to deal with a situation of war, and apart from that, going on and teaching the kids in school, going on and thinking about tourism, going on and thinking about how to help the people who lost their legs or arms, and we help with that. Also, we have a project together with Kiev in terms of helping people with the prothesen.
I'm blanking.
You know, this means for replacing
prosthetics, I think.
Prosthetics, yeah. And I think what is important, if you talk about tourism and you talk about the time in the future, you build a vision of how it can be better. And that is, I think, really important for the hope of people. Mm-hmm. And we signed a memorandum of understanding. Burkhard Kieker is here from our tourism supporting agency here in Berlin, and we signed together with Kiev a memorandum of understanding to work together in terms of tourism. Even if we know that at the moment it is difficult, we have signed this agreement of cooperation for the future and for now. And I think these signs are really important because they give hope and because they say everything you can do to bring people to a certain place and to travel and to get into contact and dialogue with others can give a part for peace. Mm-hmm. And I think especially now, we had yesterday the 36th jubilee of the fall of the wall in Berlin. It is a very important day for us. And I was at the Brandenburg Gate yesterday. I saw how many people came also for the NFL games. I mean, a lot of people who visit the city of sports, Berlin. And it's so important to appreciate what has been reached in terms of freedom, in terms of democracy, but also to say this is not for granted. We have to fight and to make the defense for all these things, right?
I want to cut in there because how does this contrast with the AfD rising to the strongest party in some of the surveys, with a racist sentiment growing, with the government talking about closing borders or deporting people even to areas of crisis? Doesn't this send the wrong message when we're trying to...
That is indeed the case. You have to say that democracy is not a certain state that we have reached and that it is a process where you have to do something for it. And of course we see the rise of the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, as they call themselves. And it is a right-wing party which has a lot of people who say, yes, that is my party. And this is something we have to not only be worried about, but we have to set something against it.
What can be done against it?
As a social democrat, I say always, when people have certain fears, and they say we are frustrated or we are not so confident that democracy is the best field we can live in, I think conferences like here who show that in many parts of the world, democracy and freedom is absolutely not the case. We have to see and appreciate what we have already reached here in Berlin, but we also have to tackle the problems that people have in their minds. Yeah, so good politics can also be the best thing to defend democracy. I think that is easier said than it can be done. But I think education, democratic education, participation, taking people's fears seriously, but never ever judge when people say, I go away from democracy because I'm frustrated about anything. Yeah, and so, I mean, we have to support all the NGOs, all the people who fight for democracy, and we have to, to see that democracy is a process, and it's something that has always to be defended.
Kathrin Anselm, we're unfortunately already at the end of the panel, but I wanted to ask you for a last word. What can business do to fight radicalization and extremism?
That's a great question. And my answer to this is be very, very clear about your values. You know, define them from the top leadership and cascade them down every single day to your employees. Make sure they get bias training. They can participate in social work. They can work on projects like my team and I could. It was a side hustle, supporting the Ukrainian efforts and housing these people and finding temporary housing for them. Allowing them to take time off to go to manifestations. There's so much you can do. There is no silver bullet. But it starts, in my mind, with having your values very clear and prioritize them every single day, and then the actions will follow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariana Oleskiv. Thank you, Kathrin Anselm. Thank you, Franziska Giffey. Mariana, we promise to all come and visit Ukraine. The city of Odessa is one of the most beautiful I've ever seen, and we're all hoping for peace soon and lots of tourism to Ukraine.
Thank you. It's a very important message for our hospitality industry, because people keep working and they don't want to change it. They want to welcome their international guests again. And I really hope that with all of your support, it will happen soon.
And it is thank you very much.